and welcome to the webinar or panel discussion on securing the enterprise stack. It's a fireside chat hosted through this live stream. I am Janikiram MSV, and I'll be your moderator for next 1 hour. Before we get started, a couple of housekeeping announcements. This is a webinar format, so attendees are going to be in listen-only mode, and you do have an opportunity to ask questions. There is a chat or Q&A button at the bottom of the panel. You can click that and type away your question, and we'll try to respond if time permits. And if we don't get your question live, we'll definitely follow up after the session. So why are we here? Over the past year, enterprise AI has certainly moved from pilots and demos to real production workloads. It's embedded into customer support, internal co-pilots, developer tooling, security operations, and beyond. But as the AI stack becomes real, it also becomes vulnerable and attackable. There are new threat surfaces, new supply chain risks, new data paths, and a lot of uncertainty around what good security actually looks like. So today we are about to cut through the buzzwords and jargon and get into the specifics of securing the AI stack. I'm joined by two terrific speakers and guests who sit on different sides of this problem, the builder side and the buyer and operator side. On the builder side, we have Rahul Jadhav, who is the co-founder and CTO of AccuKnox. He's a CNCF ambassador specializing in cloud-native AI and edge. He's also the maintainer of CNCF project KubeArmor, holds many patents. Rahul, welcome to this panel.
Pleasure to be here, Jankiram.
Awesome. And then we have Karthik Ivaturi, who is a seasoned information and cybersecurity leader with 12 plus years of experience driving security transformations at notable organizations. Currently, he is the senior information security lead at Sonesta. Karthik, welcome to the panel.
Thank you. Thank you for this chance, and pleasure to meet you both.
Awesome. So over a period of time, the application stack has evolved, matured, and grown into a very well-defined stack. Today, if you ask an architect or a seasoned professional to explain how the modern application delivery stack looks like, he'll go all the way from containers to the load balancer, and there are well-defined layers that actually form this stack. But the enterprise AI stack is still evolving, and it is not mature yet. It is work in progress. So I want to start off with this theme of where exactly are we in evolving the enterprise stack? How does that look like? So first, I will go to Rahul to get his perspective because he has been securing this stack or attempting to secure this stack as it evolves, it's a moving target. And then I'll also get the perspective from Karthik on what does he consider when he is looking at an enterprise AI stack. So Rahul, what's your view?
Absolutely. So my view is in general based on what I discussed with my customers, prospects, and within AccuKnox itself, the way in which we have built, right? Like, and there are two views that I come across. One is the model-centric view, and then there is a data-centric view. When it comes to a model-centric view, people usually think, try to stack up GPU ASICs, then you have inference engines on top of it, and then on top of it, prompt management systems, context management systems, then AI agent solutions, AI gateways come on top of it, and then you have AI applications such as chatbots. The other thought process that I have seen, usually the way in which prospects and users talk about it, is the data centric view, where LLM is essentially sitting at an edge, where you have your data workflow automation, you have AI agents that they're looking at, and almost everything is provided by someone else. The large language model provider is yet another application for them. That's how they see it. And the whole point about the building fast versus building self, right? Like that's where a lot of companies a lot of organizations have to take their own decisions, is what I see. But in general, when it comes to model stack, I see more and more cloud-based stacks getting made use of, at least today. It's incredibly painful to actually do self-hosted stacks, but there are organizations who are doing it. And unless and until you know what you're doing, you shouldn't get into that business, is what I would say. But there are organizations who have valid concerns for doing their own stuff. But yeah, these are the model centric view with GPUs down the layer, and all the way till AI applications. And on the other side, the data centric way, where people are thinking, hey, this is my data. If I leverage an AI agents with an external LLM provider, it just becomes an additional application for them. So these are the two views that I usually come across.
Perfect. So,
Mhm.
Karthik, from a buyer's perspective, what drives the decision between a managed API approach, which is consuming Azure OpenAI, Amazon Bedrock, or Google Cloud Vertex AI, versus self-hosted inference? How does that choice really impact the security posture of an organization?
Yeah, I think Rahul touched on the architecture, right? So from my point of view, it's a bit different because when we end up having solutions being put forth within the company, right? It's all about, oh, we can save this much amount of money if we go this path, right? That's the initial argument that the business owner or the application owner would submit. But from the moment we see something coming onto our table, the first question that we would ask is, um, hey, would you want to build your own warehouse or would you want to lease an apartment building? Right?
Hmm.
It comes down to that, right? Because if you have an apartment building, you do not have to worry about physical security, right? It's already provided to you, like the pipelines, the plumbing is already there. You do not have to reinvent the wheel. uh, Based on, if you want to do a warehouse, would you scratch everything? Would you build everything from scratch? Why would you do that, right? What is the risk tolerance of the company, and what will you be guarding or securing? You have to secure the entire stack, right? Because when we see from the evolution of attacks that are happening in the past 6 months, it nothing has changed from an attacker's perspective. It's the same thing. It's credential harvesting through your APIs or OAuth tokens, same thing, nothing changed. And if you look at the attacker is looking for the same thing, soft, like a trust boundary. Where can I breach the boundary, right? It by prompting, right? You can change your attack surface. It changes significantly. So when it comes to our table, we think about what would be the attack scenarios for each of the options, self-hosted versus managed services. And I think the most important piece, most often companies would try to forget, is the legality behind the two approaches, right? Which is, hey, commercial models do not allow your inputs and outputs to be used for training the model, versus the other way around, you would end up your inputs and outputs being trained in the model. So it again comes down to risk tolerance and what level of problems you would face, right? So yeah, it's an interesting, but the foundation is the same. The questions
Right,
are almost the same.
right. So there is always this concern from enterprises that my data might be used for training the new model, or it might show up in the next iteration of fine tuning or training. So, in this build versus buy paradox, using managed APIs offered by hyperscalers and neoclouds versus someone building up their entire stack based on open source, how does this concern or this security risk of my data getting exploited and being used for training, where does that fit in this build versus buy paradox?
I would say, I think, if from our point of view, from security's point of view, we always say, do not own the risk. Try to limit the risk as much as possible, right? Because security teams are often not revenue generation, right? They always spend money. You're famous for spending money within the company where you don't give them back anything. There's no easy way to quantify the revenue, right? So if such is the case, our job is to ensure that, hey, do you understand that you're increasing your attack surface if it is self-hosted?
Hmm.
You would a developer be interested when I say, nope, you cannot get a local administrative privileges? They will be losing their mind, because they would say, no, I need to update the model. I need to have privileges across the board, right? Unless and until you have an entire security infrastructure put in place that can cover a good number of bases, you definitely don't want to choose the path of self-hosted. Instead of transfer the risk, let the managed services be offered. Make sure legal, work with your legal teams, right? Ensure you have correct language put in, and then pass the baton to the service provider, whoever the company, the application that you want to buy services, AI services.
Perfect,
Yeah.
perfect. That makes sense. So double clicking on the AI stack, there is a very important element that is surfacing, that is becoming prominent, and that is the AI gateway. So comparing that to the microservices architecture stack or traditional application stack, you wouldn't go live without an API gateway. Now, the API gateway is primarily the gatekeeper of your entire deployment. It does a lot of things. It manages security, it manages throttling, it manages routing. It also provides you observability. So API gateways have gained a lot of prominence in the microservices architecture. And what I'm seeing is the evolution and the rise of AI gateway, which is analogous to an API gateway, but for the AI stack. So, for the benefit of audiences, the AI gateway plays a very similar role, but it is very different from the API gateway. It is basically responsible for prompt caching. It is responsible for managing the throughput, and it is aware of the LLM so that it can route to the same LLM, saving you the cost of tokens that are getting generated again and again. So there are very new capabilities of these gateways, and this is becoming an important element of the stack. It's actually the front and center of the entire AI stack. That is the AI gateway. So uh, Rahul, how do you architect a gateway layer that doesn't become a performance bottleneck and doesn't become a security nightmare?
Yeah.
Because if you compromise the AI gateway, you pretty much open the doors or you hand over the keys to someone to enter into your building, right? So how do you secure this AI gateway?
So before going into the AI gateway, right? I would like to just touch upon the reason why we are seeing organizations moving to a gateway based model, and the primary reason that I'm coming across is that in most of these cases, most of the organizations are leveraging multiple models and multiple LLM providers. And at some point in time, they have to ensure that the access to these model providers is gated.
Hmm.
And that's the first reason that most of the organizations go into that mode. And AI gateway allow you to add different model providers. That's the first use case. And then you have uh, taps on top of it. You have token limitations. You can create teams, and you can have all sorts of visibility that is mentioned. Now, when it comes to AI gateway, you mentioned about two concerns is what I generally see in the context. One
Hmm.
is now AI gateway is becoming a single point of failure. Yeah, everything is going through the AI gateway, and you have a single point of failure that could be managed in some shape or form using redundancy. But that's still a concern today. The other bigger concern is that the latency part gets easily you know i- 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 you know the latency increases very sharply if you start making use of some of the advanced features that security features that the AI gateway provides, specifically the guardrails. Now, the guardrails essentially under the hood are operating either as ML models or large language models as a judge to decide whether the prompts that they are getting are kosher. And to do this analysis, it has to be in line first, and then take a decision saying this is the prompt that I would like to send it to the next level. That increases the latency, and I'm seeing that a lot of early stage solutions, guardrail based solutions, are still using compute based infrastructure under the hood to take that decision. It greatly increases the latency. I've seen anything from 500 milliseconds to 10 seconds,
Hmm.
kind of this thing. 10 seconds, it won't usually work out, but it's very clearly visible. But if you're using LLM as a judge, and if you're actually hosting that LLM as a judge on a compute instance, then you're bound to get that kind of latency. That's the but by the time by the time organization realize that this could be an impediment, what happens is that they add one policy to to start testing with. Then all of a sudden the organization needs increase. They stack a policy on policy. Each of these policy is going to add to the latency, because each of these policies is then going to connect to a LLM or an ML model and then give out a response in a serial fashion, and that basically becomes a bottleneck at some point in time. So you have to have a strategy when you're deciding on an AI gateway strategy. If you're going to make use of some of these advanced features, how are they going to impact the latency? And if they're going to impact the latency, what other contingency plans you have to make? For example, if you're leveraging guardrails, you have to ensure that those guardrails are GPU hosted in the first place. And as in how you increase the most number of policies, there are at least tens of different policies that you can actually specify on top of these guardrails. So that's the other part. The other risk that we see is self-deployed AI gateways, and this is even true for inference engines, right? Like typically, traditionally, if your AI gateway is compromised, then you're basically at risk of everything. Your whole
Hmm.
organization is at risk of your data, your the whole operations. The bigger risk that I see is that the AI gateway could be in a position to actually respond back with incorrect output that will then determine what decisions are taken. Essentially, with AI systems, you're not just controlling data, right? Like you have autonomous decision systems in play. Now you have with AI gateway, you have this capability as an attacker, the way attackers see it, you have this capability of influencing the decision processes within the organizations, and that is a huge risk. There are multiple ways in which we see that the prospects are taking care of that risk by making sure that you have the standard aspect, but then sandboxing of the AI gateways itself. Within sandboxing, you have multiple ways of then isolating different tenants, different users, because different tenants will have need access to different kind of models and things like that, right? Like, so that isolation techniques are also coming into play. But if you're deploying an AI gateway by yourself, and then the other part is that the AI gateways could be daisy chained.
Hmm.
Mhm.
And while daisy chaining is just like network gateways or network routers, it can AI gateways can be daisy chained as well. And one of the gateway can introduce a bigger latency than others, and then you need to have an observability solution in place, just like API gateway. Tomorrow you're going to come into the same questions that you ask. Hey, oh, my API all of a sudden is now increased, the latency has increased from 5 milliseconds to 50 milliseconds. Where could the problem be? You need a way to check out those problems. So those kind of visibility observability system you need to have in place. And with all of this stacks in place, you will have to ensure that this gets baked in right in the earlier phase, because you are going to run into this problems eventually.
Right, right. So, what I observe is a lot of customers primarily use the gateway to expose a standard API because heterogeneous providers have diverse API. Like Anthropic uses a different API, OpenAI uses a different API. So the AI gateway delivers kind of a homogeneous API, so the developers will always use the same communication, irrespective of the backend or the model that they're talking to. So so Karthik, with enterprises using multiple LLM providers simultaneously, through the
Mhm.
AI gateway, how does the security posture differ when you are scanning traffic across OpenAI, Anthropic, and open source models, all fitting in the same pipeline?
Ah, so I think, yeah, for me, it's like airport security again, right? It's airport security or customs in your in the airport. If if you if you're going through customs and customs doesn't seize contraband, is it really customs at that point? Right? I mean, same thing with airport security too. I mean, you definitely want to do quick screening of individuals, but of course, you definitely need to have secondary checks as well, right? So when I see uh, API security or AI security gateways, it's the same concept. We definitely would want to have API gateways or AI gateways in place, but it's, I think, uh, most often not, there is a missing link around configuration management. We from security often see that whenever API security gateways or AI gateways are deployed, they most often not the security best practices in deploying those gateways are almost not fully followed, right? There are tweaks that can be done where you can let go certain traffic, right? It's for us, defense in depth only comes when I know that there is visibility. Like we need to know where the data moves. When a malicious entity attempts, I think Rahul touched on attackers gaining access to the customer's data within an application that is being provided as a service, right? For us, it's about visibility. If I do not know if the data is leaving, how are you going to secure it, right?
Mm.
It is absolutely needed, but I think it's how we have seen as you can definitely improve it if if certain conditions are met around configuration management and best practices are followed. That significantly improves your ability to scale your API gateways and how you deploy it across your different environments, production, staging, and test, and of course, your other secondary environments, right? Sandboxing environments. The way you deploy it and you test different controls, security controls, you can absolutely eliminate certain issues around latency because it's the thing is there are more tools at hand when it comes with security, right?
Mm-hmm.
You need API security is giving your AI gateways are giving you the ability to detect data in transit, right? Do not forget, if the data needs to move in transit, there it needs to sit somewhere. So the data at rest can also be looked at. You can secure your data at rest as well. So you can have more controls in place at rest and in transit, playing together, right? Turning the right knobs at the right time will absolutely, I think, should give the ability to efficiently handle the gateways.
Got
if
it.
if I may just add on here, right? Like, I see
Yes.
one more pattern that is emerging in this space. So if your AI gateway is going to make enforcement decisions en route,
Mm-hmm.
then you have a different design pattern. But if it is only in the monitor mode, then you can
Mm-hmm.
go with a approach that might not impact the latency, because that
Correct.
was one of the concerns that was raised, right? Like initially. So one of the patterns that we have seen is that you have API gateway in front of the AI gateways, and if AI gateways are purely in monitoring mode, wherein you're just going to flag the concern or just keep the conversations that are getting sent to the models uh, archived somewhere, then the API gateways allow you to send traffic in a one-off mode, in a
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
synchronous mode, where it
Right.
copies the request and responses, but it doesn't keep it in line. You can
Correct.
still monitor it. So there's no impact on the organization. The organization continues to work as it is. That's the model that most of the organization follow on day one. On day two, they decide, hey, this might be required in the enforcement mode, and these are the applications that would need enforcement, because they are eventually going to a large language models which we do not necessarily trust, but we have to use it for the application purpose. So those kind of decision makings come into play over a period of time.
Right, right. So, having talked about the AI stack and the role of an AI gateway, we are actually entering into the crux of the essence of the overall discussion. So, Rahul, of all the major AI specific threat vectors, call out top three and explain what those are. What can really go wrong?
Yeah. Oh my goodness, the AI is rife with especially because we talked about self-hosted versus cloud-hosted.
Mhm.
Threat model completely differs. There is something called a shared responsibility model when it comes to cloud-hosted environments, and the inference engines, the serving engines are a responsibility. The security of those service engines are a responsibility of the cloud providers. But we see different types of attack surfaces at different layers. If you are in if you have the capability as an attacker to dig deeper, to touch up directly the GPUs using the CUDA based risks, or you might have seen so many vulnerabilities that are announced for NVIDIA container toolkits. The remote command injections are getting announced almost on a monthly basis, because it's so widely used now. So if an attacker has a privilege to actually touch up directly at the inference engines level, or if you are self-deploying the inference engines such as VLLMs, NVIDIA Triton, NVIDIA Dynamo, or Olama, or some of
Hmm.
these self-deployed inference engines, you have the capability to actually ingest, do weight tampering,
Mm-hmm.
ingest your own poison models. And we have shown this. The risk with that approach, with that, the biggest risk as an organization there, I feel, is that when your AI agents queries these models are not going to stop responding. That would have been better, actually. But they're going to respond with a bad output, which would jeopardize your decision making process. And I'll give an example, right? Like, we just recently showed this demo as part of IBM Tech Expo, uh, where there was an edge AI scenario. And this edge AI, it was basically the edge deployment was mounted on top of an armored vehicle,
Hmm.
and the armed personals were using the edge AI to take decisions. Like, for example, target is at location X, and we have uh, you know uh, sections at location B and C, which is the section that can fastest reach the target.
Hmm.
The, AI is in the best position to actually take into consideration multiple factors and give you a decision that you can then weigh on. But with poisoned weights, we've shown that the AI gives you a response that is incorrect, that leads to a bad decisions being made in the battlefield. And this kind of the repercussions are huge, right? Like, that's why I say it's not just, you're now basically influencing an autonomous decision systems that you have been relying on. Previously you're relying on human beings, but now you're relying on machines more so than ever. And the attackers have the ability to influence that decision making process. So that's at the
Hmm.
inference engine level. Then we have other layers, right? Like prompt caching layer, as you mentioned, where there is this risk of short-term and long-term memory poisoning. Every large language model provider, when you go to chatgpt.com, it remembers, right? Like, it remembers what you have asked yesterday, day before yesterday, last week, and based on that, it customizes your responses. That's essentially your long-term memory that it's storing in the context of not just the session, but as a user, your information is getting stored in the long-term memory by these large language models. If you're deploying some of these systems in house, or even if the provider of these large language models have to worry about them themselves, but they are in a better position to worry about it because they are managing scale at global scale, right? Like, but if you're deploying it yourself, you have to ensure that this large long-term memories cannot be tampered with. So you have to have strategies around it. It's extremely risky. And Karthik will touch upon, like, this is now keeping users data.
Hmm.
Users data is now getting cached in these places. And how do you evaluate? That's a different problem statement altogether, in my opinion. I don't even know where to go with that. Maybe Karthik will be able to better touch on that part. And then there is other layers, right? The AI agents layer. We have been hearing about concepts such as MCP servers, AI agents,
ATA protocols.
bots, and what happens if this AI agents gets compromised. And OASP team has come up with a great threat modeling for agentic AI. It shows all the risks. The most biggest risk is the excessive agency part, is what I feel. The excessive agency, the whole point of an AI agent is that it has access to memory and external tooling, just
Hmm.
like any other person, right? Like, as a user, I have access to memory and external tooling, which allows me to do my tasks. The same is the case with AI agents. And now, if I'm able to influence AI agents, then you know the risk, right? Like, and we have seen this risk already getting played out in the real world environments, where the data has been deleted, wiped off, because it
Mm-hmm.
had excessive agency. Nothing more than that, right? Like, the AI agent had the ability to do something. It's Some of these are safety risks and some of these are security risks. Security is when people or attacker you know tries to deliberately change the course of action. Safety is that within the required course of action, things get changed, which causes safety risks, right? Like, so both of these things, safety and security, have to be taken into consideration. But security is something that you can control
Hmm.
at the end of the day. Safety is something that you'll have to plan for, but you'll have to consider worst case situation. What happens if my car goes into an accident? The airbags will get deployed. That's the safety model that I'm depending upon. Okay, but from the security perspective, I have to make sure that my doors are locked and for my car, right? Like, so that's something that is in your control. So again, at different layers, I see different aspects getting played out. It's a huge attack surface in my opinion, and then the people and organizations shouldn't think it from the traditional perspective, right? Like, you can't have a firewall model. You have to assume that the risk already exists inside,
Hmm.
then start taking decisions. Because if you don't do that, then you're going to get compromised because of a vulnerability that was unknown and which got compromised, right? Like, your attacks are at machine speed, your defenses have to be at machine speed as well today.
Got it.
I
What's
think
it?
he touched on a lot. Sorry to cut you off, Johnny Kiran, but I think for it, I think you reached a point. I think the world reached a point where the traditional controls, like Rahul was talking, wouldn't suffice at all,
Hmm.
because uh, this goes back to, I think, what he talked about. I think Rahul touched on the different layers, right, and how different attack vectors exist. I think we see it a bit more different uh, adoption of AI attacking us in the industry, right? We have seen those attacks come through, right? I think it comes down to, it's not the old school thief where the thief will attempt to prick the safe. It's done. That's not the goal. I think the thief would spend time social engineer the receptionist. You know, they wouldn't be worried about, oh, I need to get to the safe. Don't worry about it. You'll get to it. They will get to it. It's not it's not like, I think in the past it was, oh, will I be compromised or will I be breached either today or tomorrow? That's how we see things. I think it's now down to, will I be compromised in the morning or in the afternoon? I think we reached that point, right? It's because the scale at which things are moving is at a very fast pace. I think uh, uh, there was an article that, I think there's an entire study that was published back in November uh,
Hmm.
by Anthropic. I think you briefly touched on it, Rahul, right? So around the cyber espionage, state actors, how they spend the time, right? And how AI was used across the board, like recon, privilege escalation, lateral movement, right? Everything was done end to end through through using AI, right? At the end of the day, right? So it is simply the same thing. I think nothing changes because defense in depth is the same across the board. MITRE, I'm sure everyone will be familiar with the MITRE attack framework, right? But I think
Hmm.
MITRE came up with a new framework called Atlas, right? The Atlas framework is applicable to AI related attack scenarios, which is, I think, the maturity around using that framework will evolve within the next 6 to 8 months.
Hmm.
Upon that evolution, you will see better guidance around your AI gateways, your API gateways. The holistic deployment of security controls will automatically come in. I think we are at a pace where it will happen. The MITRE class adoption will happen very soon. And I think the moment it happens, you will gain control over understanding what different vectors exist,
Right.
right?
Right.
You could use that as a framework to begin educating yourself and understanding, okay, this is a possibility, right?
Hmm.
That's
Hmm.
how you did for with MITRE attack too. MITRE Atlas will help you because it's the same thing. Project prompt injection plus IAM, privilege escalation plus logging is the same run book playbook that you would have to follow for incident response too, right? You would have to go through all of these. I mean, in my mind, it's simply not a magical solution to identify these vectors. It's the same concept: application security, identity and access management, and data governance. All three together will provide you the necessary controls to
Right.
to mitigate these vectors. So
Absolutely. Great point of view. So while we are at it, due to the rise of open source microservices and various packages that are now hosted on GitHub, the software supply chain has gained a lot of prominence. And the SBOM, the software bill of material, has become like the
Yep.
very important aspect for organizations consuming open source and building their microservices stack. So
Yeah.
comparing the software supply chain and the SBOM with the emerging AI stack and the emerging AI threat vectors, how do you see this evolve? And Karthik, can you touch upon the new world of software supply chain in the context of LLMs and SBOM in the context of the whole Gen AI world?
Yeah, I think again from sitting from a buyer's point of view, right? Buyers and security perspective, it's how well you vet your vendors.
Hmm.
It's talking about third party risk, fourth party risk, fifth party risk. It doesn't stop anymore at fourth or fifth. It's coming down to even sixth at that point. How well you do your due diligence on your vendors, you would end up reducing the risk, right? I think again, like I said in the beginning, right, the holistic view around not just implementing application security within the company, right? You have many tools to implement AppSec, right? But still, when it comes down to from a buyer's point of view, if I do want a solution being procured by my business units, I do my due diligence. I basically say, okay, you're getting you build this. What is your information security program, right? You got to ask these questions. Talk to me. You basically need to ask the vendor from what's your information security program and how what's your breach response procedures look like,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? And if you have a third party that is offering services for you, what are your SLAs? Bring accountability. I think the moment you start to pursue in this direction, the third party and the fourth party are now required to improve their AppSec programs, right? They have to limit their exposure to, and of course, to the vulnerabilities and the threat vectors. They have to comply after that, or else they would lose business, right? So, I mean, I think Rahul will anyways touch on the implementation of different security controls within your organization for around AppSec or SDLC or SSDLC. There's so many fancy four-letter acronyms or five-letter acronyms that are there, right? So it it will be there, but we do not want to forget from vendor management, from your third-party risk management. You do not want to forget that. That is your a better path to solve the problem rather than having to solve it for yourself.
Completely, completely. Now, extending on that, with every new wave in the industry, we have seen the shadow concept lurking around in the enterprises. When virtual machines came, we have seen developers build their own VMs and quietly running it on their desktops within the departments. When containers came, we have seen developers using Docker pull and getting shadow containers and Kubernetes clusters running inside organizations. Now the same risk is extended to AI. A developer using Olama and pulling an unknown, very risky open source model from Hugging Face and trying to feed in corporate data to it, right?
Mhm.
So this is one of the biggest risks for CXOs, shadow AI, where models and RAG pipelines and a lot of unproven vector databases running inside the organization. So given that context, Rahul, from your point of view, what can a CXO do to control the proliferation of shadow AI within the organization? How can they get the control back? And then, Karthik, I'll come to you with the same question because I would love to hear
I'm
what you
ready.
have to say.
I'm ready on that front. But please, Rahul, yes.
Yeah. This is the first and foremost concern that we keep hearing almost from every security team. Now they have been given a mandate of securing, the AI security, AI assets. The first question that anyone is going to ask is what are these assets? Where are they located?
Hmm.
It's natural, but natural, and it's like you said, there are managed and unmanaged assets. So if we are deploying AI agents, MCP tools on managed infrastructure such as Azure Copilot Studio or AWS Bedrock Agent Core or something like that, right? Like you have visibility into it. But your AI application developers are not going to wait for someone to provision them access to this managed infrastructure. They're going to start building it themselves, and they're going to forget, right? Like they spun up an EC2 instance with a GPU attached, deploy a VLLM, and forget about it, right? Like at some point in time, and that becomes an attack surface for yourself, your organization. Now your security team needs to understand where these unmanaged assets are. That's the biggest ask. If you ask, ask me in terms of what we hear from our prospects, the visibility into where my assets are, and how is it that I can tell the team that exactly you go here, and then either remove it or provide us an explanation as to why this is. uh, the next immediate step that they ask is, once we have this visibility, what we can do about it, right? Like how do we set policies on top of it? If tomorrow, then the workflows begin. Typical cycle. Once you get the security team the visibility, the next level questions will automatically come up. So now they ask us, okay, how many of these are actually security, there are security vulnerabilities in these systems. There's these unmanaged resources, unmanaged AI assets. How many of them might have security issues? So that's the other part that comes into play immediately next, right? Like, but no one will ask that on the day one. They'll say, hey, I want this. I want to know where we stand in terms of AI assets. So unless and until I tell my, I want to be in a position where if someone asks me, what is the AI security posture of your organization, I'll be able to say, hey, 60% of it is there on the managed infrastructure, but still 40% AI developers are using EC2 instances, and I would like to not allow my AI developers to use GPU instances that are directly on EC2 hosts. So then the subsequent policies can be framed. That's the journey that we usually see.
Perfect. Karthik.
It's going to be fun because I'll tell you something, right? Again, going back to the foundation, visibility, right? That's from most information security programs have a few metrics that we target year over year. One of them will definitely be, and the first one in the list is visibility, right? In certain industries, like in hospitality or even in transportation industry in the United States, right? So there are requirements when it comes to your information security program, right? There are certain metrics that you need to definitely try to meet. And one of them, and most of the other industries also follow, and it's just a common practice across for CISOs, they follow this, which is the first one is visibility. I think Rahul said, he said, where are my assets, right? And who's trying to do what, right? I think what being a practitioner, being an enforcer within the company, you would tend to say use different controls, right? Like you said, if certain VMs are being built in your AWS or Azure instances, we use tools saying, it's something spun up. Okay, so the first thing we ensure that we ask right away, we have the security operations alert on saying something changed. And the second, because the moment we see something like that, if it's not documented in change management, again, it comes down to process procedures, right? People, process, and technology, right? Which is, if the process fails around change management, no mercy. You basically cut down the machine. You do this a couple of times, you may be smacked for it, but at the end of the day, you have to enforce it. For me, in my mind, it's like a no smoking sign in a mall, right? It doesn't stop a fire. If you don't have sprinklers, it's not going to stop a fire, right? So at the end of the day, if you have the visibility and you have the ability to terminate certain changes in the environment you can write any number of policies, right? Policy writing is not the problem in most companies. Enforcing the policy is the problem, right? So I think if you have the ability to detect these shadow AI or right, your the moment you detect it, enforce it. Let it come back and find out what you can do after that, right? So if the moment you have in a way that you start to enforce, and your senior leadership would come back and say, oh, why did you do so? You can then ask them basically who's going to own the risk. Then it's an easier way to have a conversation around risk. Or we terminate, we had an impact in the business. Excellent. So who owns the risk? Absolutely. As long as you own the risk, please have fun creating as many VMs as you want, right? And have your open models being used in the environment, absolutely. But the moment you have visibility, I think most often not, security teams tend to take time, because they are often reactive because of the lack of budgets and everything. But I think a step or not, I think you would want to make a right decision around choosing the right platform that gives you the visibility, right? The moment you choose the right platform that gives you visibility across different cloud security concerns, you can absolutely be in a position where you can enforce and basically mitigate, the risk that arises with this with this shadow AI and all of the others. Yeah.
Absolutely. So a year from now, very early in 2027, we'll have exactly the same panel, and we will discuss the impact of shadow AI and what organizations and enterprises are doing to protect themselves, right? But in the interest of time, I want to move on to the next theme, and this is the elephant in the room, and this is about agentic AI, right? Now, so far we have been talking about one model and the inference stack, but with agentic AI, the risk just multiplies manifold. For example, just yesterday, Perplexity has announced something called Perplexity Computer that orchestrates 19 models, not one or two, but 19 models. So the attack surface just expands disproportionally, with agentic AI coming in. And then we have protocols like MCP that Rahul has touched upon. And then we have A2A protocols that will make agents invoke other agents. So this space is just exploding, with innovation, with new protocols, new buzzwords. But the bottom line is the risk multiplies tremendously with agentic AI because we are no more dealing with just one model, but a chain of models and a plethora of models that are sometimes well known, sometimes not so well known, sometimes fine tuned. So, what changes to the attack surface can we expect? When we move from a single LLM based co-pilots and chatbots to agentic AI.
The way I see it in terms of the biggest risk that the agentic AI system and the next generation agentic AI system, which are essentially cascaded agents or multi-level cascaded agents, they talk to each other using A2A protocol, but and then they take a decisions are owned by the swarm, not an individual agent itself. That the biggest problem that I see, and one of the hindrance in terms of adopting that kind of scale, is the authentication authorization problems in a multi-layer agent system that shows up. We still do not have a better approach to solving that authorization problem. In my opinion, the world is, we have, the standardization committees that are working towards building up specifications, and the whole dynamicity of the
Hmm.
tools, right? Like, you can't expect the MCP tool might be existing for for a tool, for example, Atlassian. You might have you have an MCP server, you want to leverage that MCP tool, and your user might already be connected to that Atlassian. But would your agent have the similar privileges directly? Would an agent who connects to another agent would have the same privileges, in a downstream manner? Those kind of questions are getting asked, and there's no easy solution there. I feel it's a huge the adoption risk. There is an adoption, people are staying, holding off because of these kind of risks. They cannot, they do not have a clear picture as to what will be the permission eventually this agent have if overall the prompt comes through this particular path. Like, there's no way that they control that scenario today, which is
Hmm.
causing them to hold back. So that's one of the biggest risks that in terms of adoption that we are seeing. The second aspect is, like I mentioned before, the excessive agency part, and the excessive agency for both MCP servers as well as the AI agents. One of the solutions that have been talked about in forums is in sandboxing the AI agents itself. I feel
Hmm.
you need multi-level solution. You have guardrails applied, then you have sandboxing applied. If you have that multi-level defense in depth kind of mechanism, so I'll give Karthik's analogy. When you go to the airport, You're physically tested, but then you're tested at every gate, right? Like once you go to
Mm.
the next level, your boarding pass is checked before you enter the flight. The seat is checked, and all of these checks happen. So it has to have a multi-level defense. You can't rely only on saying a guardrails based approach. Guardrails are heuristic in nature, right? Like probabilistic in nature. Eventually they are influenced by another LLMs or ML models. So they are circumventable, is what I see today. If you depend upon the biggest risk that I see is the false sense of security that people usually have, right? Like you equate prompt firewall to web application firewall, and it's not the
Mm.
same. It's not the same at all. And they say, hey, I have AI agents and I have prompt firewall, that's it. The work is done. I can expose my internal assets to the large language models internally. Let's say no one is trying to expose the internal assets to frontier models today. No one in the right minds, I would say. But we never know. But even internally, exposing their internal assets to the on-prem deployed models they are worried about is because there are multiple departments within the organization itself. So if at some point in time model sends back the responses, uh, and if there is a prompt firewall which couldn't stop it, and there is always a possibility of that, then how do you handle that kind of scenario?
Mm.
Those are the risks that every organization is thinking about. You need different layers of security, just like any other uh, 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 application. But in this case, the security solution, the biggest, like I said, the biggest risk I see is the false sense of security. You deploy a prompt firewall and you assume that it's going to hold off to every evil out there in the world. That's never the case. uh,
Mm.
right, like web application firewall and prompt firewall are two different kind of technology. One is
Right.
a deterministic technology, another is a probabilistic technology. And there are ways to circumvent just by uh, no, language, by just prompt
Right.
engineering. You
Prompting.
don't need to be a developer to do it. That increases the risk several fold, right? Like
Right.
if you eventually exposing. So those, there's so many risks that have been called out. And like Karthik mentioned, there have been methodical studies, right? Like a MITRE Atlas is one, attack frameworks are one part of it, and compliance frameworks are another part of it. If you look at both of these systems, and then threat modeling aspects are there. There's a Maestro framework for AI, which changes the way in which you do threat modeling of your AI system. It asks a different set of questions rather than asking the standard questions. So you have to go through all of that, assess your organization risk, and then decides to use AI agent. But AI agent is, you know, it's going to be a reality in the next few months, for sure. No one talks about anything in years these days. Uh, so, so
Yeah.
so it's going to be a reality in few months. But the fundamental impediments of multi-level authorization, multi-level defense, is holding some of these deployments to be ran in the production environment, is what I see.
Perfect. Perfect. So, Karthik, if you have to give one advice to an enterprise that is considering implementing agentic workflows and AI agents, what is that one single advice?
AI agents versus agentic AI, right? So it's an entirely different ballgame.
Mm.
I think Rahul touched on autonomous exploitation of data, supply chain attacks, right? Credential leaks. I think you touched on credential leaks. We have seen that in Mold Book as well, right? Recently,
Absolutely.
credential
Open
leaks in
cloud.
Mold Book, right? So, I mean, it's if it comes down to the risk tolerance of the company,
Mm.
right? Again, it's if I know the CTO would want to improve capability, right? Roll out production and increase production and efficiency. From a practitioner's point of view, it would definitely be, can I implement zero trust um, at an agent level for every single agent? Can I do that? Do I have enough controls that give me the ability to enforce that, right? And again, it comes down to, I think, holistically, to the first point that I made in the beginning. It's around legality.
Mm.
I already use what Anthropic is offering. I currently use almost all models in my security operations environment. I have the ability to use different models for different agents that act and that can talk to different agents among themselves, right? But the most important piece is around legality between the agreement that you have with the individual companies. You need to have an agreement with Anthropic. Is it a commercial licensing? If it's commercial licensing, then there are different, I would say, benefits with it for security versus an enterprise or maybe a free license, right? So I think understanding the language, making sure you read the lines, the line between the lines, and see if you can implement zero trust at an agent level, and if not, who wants the risk?
Got it. Got it. Makes sense. Again, this is a topic that we should absolutely touch upon a year from now. As Rahul said, we don't think of years anymore. Year is like a light year. But in few months, we should group up again and touch upon these aspects. Well, we are almost coming to the closure of this very interesting and thought-provoking debate. Now I have three questions which are in a rapid fire mode. So I will ask them, and both of you can answer them based on your opinions and personal point of view. So let me read it out. Uh, so question number one, if you could fix one thing about how enterprises approach AI security today, what would it be? It has to be one-liner.
Yeah, the risk is no longer that the AI might give a wrong answer, right? Like it might be that it might take a wrong action at machine speed. That's the risk that you should be worried about. It's taking wrong actions at the machine speed. So that's as an organization, as a security admin in your organization or a CISO, you have to worry about this thing.
What would you fix in that case?
Yeah. In that, the zero trust model is the model. You have to understand where the risk lies. You have to do threat modeling of your AI agents, and then make sure that your controls map back to the threat model that you have done. Yeah. So that's the only way out. You have to assess the risk. Like everything is then tied back to the risk.
Karthik, one-liner.
Fix your vendor management, fix your third-party risk management. If you have a solid one, then you should be fine.
Makes sense, absolutely. Now moving on to the second question, what's the one resource or framework you would recommend to someone starting their AI security journey?
There's NIST AI, there's an RMF that was released, right? There's guidance on that. There's MITRE Atlas, like we spoke about. And of course, make sure you read about the different attacks that are happening, make sure you're up to speed on that, because I think you will be at a point in about 4 to 6 months from now, you'll be talking agents targeting agents. So make sure you read your literature.
Rahul?
There's an OASP document which talks about agentic AI threats and mitigation. You can search for OASP agentic AI threats and mitigation. That's a document that I found extremely useful. It highlights the risks in every context. As someone who is deploying agentic AI should understand those kind of risks.
Cool. So the last and final question. What changes do you expect between now and early 2027 in the context of AI security?
Yeah, this is whatever predictions we make are getting all getting sideways to what the reality is. But in general, like I said before, the attacks are going to happen at machine speed. If your defenses are not at the machine speed, operating at the machine speed, then you're going to fall through. You're going to at some point in time get attacked, like Karthik mentioned. Either it is going to be in the morning or is it going to be in the afternoon. But by before evening, you'll have to go into that mode of trying to improve the situation from where it has been.
12 months from now, sure. I mean, I'll tell you a different perspective on that front. I'm sure everybody is probably worried about how fast we will improve in AI, but I think there's another side of the story. I think I was talking to my wife earlier in the evening around, hey, what will the change be? I think she was reading about what about taxation, right? What will if AI would replace employees in a company, who's going to pay the taxes to the government? So in about 12 months time, will government step in and think about the loss of revenue? Or would it be that let's worry about that in about another 2 years? Or will there be saying, hey, large companies, big companies, would you want to slow down a bit? because they may end up losing revenue. So what will happen to GDP after that? So we never know.
Interesting. We'll again wait and watch how this evolves. So we are almost at time, but I have one question from the audience. From a policy perspective, what do you think should an AI policy cover? From a user's governance perspective and also from management enforcement perspective. It also showing up on your screen. So if you can respond to that briefly.
Yeah. If I may take that up, this is an important question, and we slightly touched upon the problem. First of all, you mentioned about governance, right? Like from a user's governance perspective. Now, who are these users? And now these could be your internal users and the external users. So if you're worried about you being an operator and your internal teams are using AI assets that you're finding it hard to govern, then you have to have policy coverage there where, like Karthik mentioned, you should never allow anyone to deploy as part of the policy to be used EC2 with direct GPU instances. If you have to have a policy which says only use managed instances of AI agents, so those policies you have to decide day on. The second part is enforcement. It's also very important, because then you'll have to have right tools to enforce those policies. You can't go manually after these instances, right? Like, and you can't let them operate for multiple months, at which point it will possibly be ossified in your overall stack, and then you can't ask them to remove it from the stack. So how is it possible for you to take that enforcement decision in few minutes or few seconds or few hours at least, before they go up and then spin off resources and then start making use of some of those aspects in the real environment? So those kind of policy controls are going to be important tools which will help you uh, ascertain those policies, and enforce those policies are going to get more and more important.
Well, that brings us to the end of this discussion and panel. Thank you so much for your insights and point of view on AI security and agentic security. I hope the audience find this useful. So we will come back and we will discuss some of the emerging topics in the upcoming months. So stay tuned for that.